Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Gathering Movement interview series. This is a movement of thought leaders, of way showers, of pioneers who are really here to empower others to become the leaders of their life. I'm so grateful today to be with Steph, and we're going to be talking all about the art of mindfulness, really activism through art, and her story of how she got here. So welcome, Steph.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks so much. I was sharing with you before, we typically don't prepare for these. I checked out some of the links that you shared with me and I shared with the community. But I like this just to be an open conversation of us just being humans and us sharing our stories, really.
Yes, I love that. So fire away. I'm ready for your questions.
Well, the first question I always like to ask is, how does the work you're doing now empower others in some way, shape, or form to be the leader of their life?
That's a good question coming up soon. So I feel like my work is rooted a lot in Black equity, right? Because a lot of the systems that we navigate and the rules and regulations we follow every day are really meant to they're rooted in limiting my experience as a Black person. They're rooted in commodifying me and every part of myself. And so my work is really focused on giving people the confidence and really recognizing the right that you get to choose how you exist. You get to choose how you show up in the world. And the best way to do that is authentically, is not necessarily existing for the function or for creating wealth for somebody else. Like, you get to carve out your own space in the world. So I think that I try to stay focused on that in the work that I do. And it's hard to navigate when you're trying to survive capitalism.
Very, very true. And I think you bring up a really, many, many good points. And that these systems are dismantling in front of our eyes. And you are a person who's here to invite us to come back to our authenticity of who we actually are beyond any of these labels that have held us down for many, many years. And you've seen this in your own experience as a Black woman in the 21st century. And you are here to help propel a new movement forward, is what it really sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to propel it um, through mindfulness and through mind-body connection and through creating beautiful things in the world. Because I think that as we grow older, we get so far away from that. We get so far removed. We're so focused on surviving and so focused on just like getting through this week or getting through this month. And I'm going to be happy when I reach this goal. But the reality is, like, you have to create that in the moment, and we don't really learn how. We don't learn how to like get in touch with our feelings and talk about them. And so the way that I do that is through art. I started making beads, like body beads, at first as a way to make like quick money. And then I realized, like, wow, this is such a mindful experience. Like, when I'm putting one bead on at a time, I'm cutting, I'm measuring, I'm making sure things are symmetrical or not symmetrical. And I'm just really present with myself. And I feel so joyous in that moment. And it's like, wow, I could have this all the time. Like, I have a right to have this all the time. And so, yeah, I just want people to like understand your feelings are there for a reason. They serve a purpose, and we shouldn't push them aside. We should embrace them. We should talk to them. We should name them. We should give them colors. Right? Because it helps. It helps.
I love that. Actually, I always talk about naming our feelings, naming our fears, calling it Freddie fear or ginger grief, really personifying our experience and our emotions so that we can, instead of feeling like they're over here, we can always befriend them and find a way to really work with them. So I'd love to hear where this all began. We all have this story of these first moments or that moment or an event or a person that kickstarted or was a catalyst for what we are doing now. So what was that for you?
Um, What wasn't it? Might be a short answer. um, but okay, so I had my son at 19. I was very young. I was just out of like a pretty abusive relationship, and my early 20s were very, we'll call it tumultuous. And I ended up like getting into a little bit of trouble. I was not in touch with my feelings, and so I was just acting on emotion, and unfortunately, like, I made a huge mistake that changed the course of my life, and I ended up having to serve prison time. I was in prison for almost 2 years. I was away from my family and my child. I lost family members in that time, and I had to figure out a way to get through, because the first thing they try to do is put you on drugs, and I didn't want to do that. Like, I didn't want to be a slave to prescriptions. And not that there's anything wrong with taking medication if you need it. However, I don't think it should be the first course of action if there are other ways to cope. And so I got into mindfulness. I learned about nonviolent communication. I learned about meditation. I started doing yoga. I was gardening. Like, I was really discovering myself. Like, unfortunately, it happened in prison, and I do not credit the prison system. That was my work. And because a lot of people like will say, "Oh, prison changed you for the better." Like, no, I changed me for the better. I just happened to do it in prison. Um, and so I got into that, and when I was released, I was certified through the Prison Mindfulness Institute to facilitate. I got a scholarship from the program because they just like recognized my interest, and they saw like how deeply I understood it. Um, and then I kind of got away from that because, once again, I had to survive capitalism coming home. I was on parole, I was on probation. I had to make sure I had a job. I had to make sure I had a place to live. And I got into manufacturing. And in that in that job, it was I was grateful for the opportunity. I was grateful to like I understood that I was an exception, because a lot of people don't have that. They don't have those resources when they come home. And so I was grateful for it, but I was mistreated a lot.
Mm.
And that really made me like question myself, like, what am I doing here? Like, this cannot be it. I just went through all of that to come in here and be othered every day and be microaggressed. Like, I didn't want to live that way. And I knew like I have this skill, I have this passion, and so I decided to invest in myself. So I quit my job. I had already been participating in the documentary, Trey Mason Desan, but I didn't know where that was going to go at that time. So I quit my job. I published my children's book through a Kickstarter. Um, and then the film like took off, and I was able to travel the country and like spread my message. I got to speak to the federal judges in California. I spoke to men in prison. I was able to really like touch people through just being honest. So after that, I was working in a bunch of different nonprofits, but the nonprofit sector has its problems as well.
Mm.
And so after I did a year of service with AmeriCorps, I did a leadership training program called New Leaders Council, and then I joined the board to the curriculum team so that I could make sure that this progressive leadership training is inclusive and intersectional. So I did that for a year, and this year I'm on the selections team, making sure that the cohort is also very inclusive. And I've just been like going, going, going. But one of the things that we don't talk about with people who are incarcerated is like the loss of time with technology, and how that can like induce your imposter syndrome and like really hold you back. Because so much of how we reach people now, especially in the pandemic, is through technology. But I was realistically away from computers or cell phones or social media for that 2 years, and then I came home and I didn't have time to learn. So there's like this element of playing catch up, and this element of maybe I'm just not like cut out for this. And so I have to really grapple with my inner imposter and ask her all the time, like, who told you this? Who told you you can't do this? So, yeah. I went on a whole tangent.
No, I think everything you said, and I'm just so inspired on so many levels of your tenacity and like your belief in yourself, because I've never been in prison, but I can only imagine that I don't think it would be very motivational inside. So how did you find this within yourself when you were there to be like, I need something and I got to do it now?
Yeah, it was survival. I had to survive. I was in a place where I was being treated inhumanely. I just told my therapist about my experience because my sister passed away while I was incarcerated, and I didn't get to go to the funeral. And the way that I was told was extremely traumatic, and I didn't even realize that they had piled extra trauma on top of that one traumatic experience until I really sat with it and processed it. And I will say that that was the one time in my life where I wasn't just going, trying to survive. Like I really had to sit and think. I really had to be with myself. And I had to make it. I had a child to come home to. I had a life to rebuild. Like, yeah, I didn't want that to be the pinnacle of my story.
Yeah. It's like those make it or break moments, and you decided to be like, I'm going to do this, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to make something of myself and of my life. Woo! That like fires me up right there, because like everyone needs to hear that. Everyone needs to hear that. Everyone listening, please listen again. Rewind this.
Yes.
So the work that you're doing now with the beads, and I actually love how you mentioned that it was so mindful for you to actually create one bead at a time and just be very intentional in what you're doing. I'd love to hear more about that process for you and who you help with those beads, or who you work with.
Okay, so the beads are traditionally West African, which is I am of a West African descent. My parents are from Cape Verde. So I did it obviously to make money selling decorative waist beads, but as you learn more the history of waist beads and their different uses, some women use them and put gemstones on them, healing stones on them. Some women use them to track their weight as opposed to stepping on a scale every day. You can see the changes in your body as the beads move up and down. I also make different like specialty pieces that are, I guess, considered lingerie. So it's like a little niche. But it's really about connecting with yourself, and for me, connecting with my ancestry. Because I'm limited in my movement because I am still on probation. I can't just get up and go the way I'd like to. I'd love to be able to travel back home and discover the whole rest of Africa, but I'm limited financially also. But it's a way to really like connect with my with my um with my lineage. And it also helped me realize like we have all of these healing practices, right? In African history or indigenous history, we have all of these healing practices that we have been disconnected to. And it's only once you start doing it, once you join a drum circle, once you start making your beads, like when you connect with all of these practices, you really discover a different sense of self.
I love it on so many levels. As someone who's born and raised in this country, we tend to forget about where we came from or anyone before us. And it's not top of mind. But when we have these intentional practices that bring us back to the roots, my family's from Ireland, so singing and dancing, food, that's a huge part of our culture, or a lot of singing, and even ceremony. So bringing that into my life has been, that link back to a deeper connection with the lineage, with the ancestry. And I love that you've been able to find that for yourself. Have you met and created a community of people who are also really honoring these West African traditions?
Yeah, for the most part, like everyone who orders them they're very respectful about what they represent. Especially like white women ordering, they're very cognizant about, okay, is this appropriation or appreciation? And we have the conversation before I decide what I'm gonna make for you. And if I feel like you just want this, like it's a fast fashion kind of thing, then I won't make them. Because I have to honor my craft. I have to honor my history, and also I have to honor you by making something that is meaningful. Um, I'm trying to get away from this like commodity culture where everything is instantaneous and you just use it for this and that and you're done with it. And things like we need to be able to give things meaning.
I had to take a for that one. We do. We really do. And I love that you in everything you've mentioned, you've always found this like deeper aspect of why you were doing the thing or what it actually represented to you or what value it taught you. And I think that almost brings us all back to this idea of mindfulness, because that's been the thread throughout everything that you've done on this journey. So for you, was this books? Was it, how did you learn? You know, what was your process like?
So at first, my first introduction to mindfulness was Peace is Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh. And that book changed my life. Like after that, I was like, okay, there is a better way to deal with this. Because I grew up very Catholic. So not the most affectionate or, not the most like outwardly loving people. They're very loving people, and I love my family. They're great. But I grew up like very stoic, very closed off, thinking that emotions didn't really serve a purpose, and that like cut off a piece of my humanity. And I really had to be fully rooted in myself to survive some of the things that I've survived, even beyond prison. Like I live at so many intersections. And people will try you, like based on your past. People will try to limit you, and I have to show people like, no, I set those limits, I set those boundaries. Like I get to show up the way that I see fit.
This brings me to like a whole other topic too, one that's near and dear to my heart, because I'm also a yoga instructor. So I've been teaching yoga for 4 years, originally in person, and I still do teach in person at one place, and it's an outpatient drug rehab center. And I love these people. I love them because I get to see them. I see who they really are. And like when we put these labels on ourselves of, oh, I'm a drug addict or I'm in prison, we automatically have this thought of who those people are and what they can't do and who they are. And like to me, I'm like, no, I don't like that. It doesn't allow and doesn't encourage anyone to break free of that mold. So what can we do as humans who are in this system but want to break free? What can we do to encourage people who feel weighed down by the titles and limitations of society? Like, how can we encourage them that they are worthy?
You have to center them. You have to listen to them. You have to ask them what they need, as opposed to trying to figure out what it is without their input. And I think that's the main problem with all of these systems, is that they operate just like that. They're systems and not human systems, right? So we need to center those people. We need to ask them what they need. And sometimes we have to accept that what they want and need is not what we feel is right, because it's not for us to decide. Like, if they decide like, oh, I'd like to stay on drugs forever, they should still have access to community care. They should still have access to resources and not be limited just because they have an addiction or choose to operate within their addiction. Because they're still human. They still need to survive. They still have a purpose, right? And we tend to think of people's purpose in terms of productivity, or in terms of, through the lens of capitalism, through the lens of commodity, as opposed to like, wow, this person is important just because they exist.
Mhm. I want everyone to listen to that one again too. And again. These are foundational truths, like we are worthy regardless of our status, our race, our gender. Like because we are human, we are worthy. And I'm on that train with you. I want to break free from these mold. I want to inspire people to use their voices, to be seen, to speak up for things that aren't right and injustices that we are not saying yes to anymore. And that's why I really do this. I wanted to give everyone a voice and a platform to share these messages. I'm just so deeply inspired by your story and everything that you shared.
Thank you. And I want to say, like, thank you for using your privilege for good. Like, we all have privilege, right? And we all deal with some form of oppression. And so if we are very intentional about the ways that we operate within our privileges and within our oppressions, we can create such an equitable world, right? If we are the one thing that I will say, like, there's been a mutual aid trend, right? Which is great. We need mutual aid, but people are operating the mutual aid as if it's charity and not community care because they're still looking at it through the lens of capitalism. And so we have to reframe things. We have to reframe how we hold on to our resources. And why is it so important that we hoard these things? Like, what does it do to our identity and our sense of self when we are able to give up a little bit for the benefit of somebody else?
Mm-hmm. So how do we change these systems? What can one person do today who listens to this change capitalism? How can they do this?
Oh, that's big because there's so many things that you can do. Just like take care of yourself first and foremost. Take care of yourself, right? Create good, healthy boundaries. And then from that point, you get to decide how much capacity you have to give. And then give it. Follow through. Like, do allyship in practice and not just in name. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm an ally." You have to do allyship.
I love doing these interviews because I feel like I get so much personally out of this too, right? We get to have such deep and meaningful conversations that you and I probably wouldn't just have if we bumped into each other at a
Right.
store. We have to be intentional with what we are doing in the world. And I think that's what you and I both agree on. We want to use platforms, we want to use our voices for change. And we are agreeing to do that together instead of separately.
Yes.
So any last kind of words of wisdom or anything else that you'd like to share with anyone who's going to be listening to this?
Words of wisdom. I don't know. I don't consider myself very wise. I just be doing stuff. Can I plug myself?
Oh yeah, that was going to be the next question. Let's go.
So I know there was like a little confusion with the name Charlotte Apricot and versus Stephanie, and so I just want to clear that up. That Charlotte Apricot is a pen name that I used when I released my book, which it's not that deep. Why I decided to do a different name. It was just a cute name, and I figured it was good for a children's book. And I'm planning on releasing more children's book, and then down the line, maybe releasing a book of poetry or some of my writings under my name for a more adult audience. But this is Resilient Mr. Ball, and he is available on Amazon. And I guess my final word of wisdom would be the last line of the book, which is, because in order to bounce, you must fall. And so the idea behind that is we're all capable of resilience. But you got to be pushed down to bounce back. It's just a reality. We all deal with stuff and we have to navigate it. And I think that if we navigate it as a community and let go of ideas of perfectionism or am I good enough, and really grapple with our inner imposters, like, we could get so much done.
I love
And
that.
it's available on Amazon.
We have the links in the description of this video, so anyone who watches, please head over to Amazon, check out Resilient Mr. Ball, check out a couple of the more other links that Stephanie also provided. And I have one last question I realized. What is your biggest dream for yourself in this world?
My biggest dream for myself in this world is to live a fully self-sustaining lifestyle, like grow my own food, have my own energy, like not have to depend on anything or anyone. Yeah, that's my biggest one.
Whew, we'll have to talk more about that
Yes.
outside of this because we're on the same wavelength. We're on the same wavelength. I love that. I love that. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I think you are very, very wise and
Oh, thank you.
speak very just beautifully. Everything you've said struck a chord in my heart, so I know it'll do the same with everyone who listens.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Like I said, like this is a new journey for me. I'm just learning to relearning to navigate technology and really venture out on my own. So I really appreciate this so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. And we will talk to you guys later. If you know someone who would be an awesome fit for this interview series, my goal is to do 100 interviews for the Gathering movement in 2021. So let's go, guys. We got this.
All right. I got people for you because I know some really good people doing some great work.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day.